These 3 late round running backs have top 10 upside. Lots of things have to go right for these running backs to hit that top 10 upside though. But the beauty of all of these guys is that they are all going in the back half of your fantasy drafts. And if you want to win big, you need to swing big. And I feel very strongly about these 3 running backs, and you'll see why. So the first running back on the list is Rashad Penny of the Philadelphia Eagles. So he is going as the running back 37 on Underdog right now, and is currently going in between round 9 and 10 in fantasy drafts right now. I get it, guys. There is a lot of exhaustion with Rashad Penny, right? There's so much exhaustion because the guy never finishes a full season. He's never finished a full season in his NFL career. He was such a talented player, and he still, I think, is a talented player, and he was drafted to be the running back 1 for Seattle. It never panned out that way. Why? Because he doesn't finish the season. He's got an injury history that's as long as Steve-O's rap sheet, man. He is also 27 years old. So he's at an age we don't want to see with running backs. So why would a guy like him have top 10 upside? There are 3 reasons why, and let's get into it. So the first reason why is because he has a very, very hyper-efficient history in the NFL. As you can see on the screen right now, he averages 5.7 yards per carry on his career. The only year that he did not average at least 4.9 yards per carry was in 2020. But what you can also notice on the screen right now is that same season, he only had 11 carries. That's not enough carries for us to decipher whether or not he was still an efficient running back. And based on what he did in 2021 and 2022, that would indicate to us that he is still very, very efficient when he gets more than 11 carries, that's for sure. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that also the seasons that he was very efficient with Seattle, these were seasons where Seattle had not a great, not a terrible offensive line. They had a very middle-of-the-pack offensive line in these years. And this leads me into the second reason I believe he has top 10 upside. He is now on the number 1 rated offensive line heading into 2023. So a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a study of running backs who are super efficient in 2022. And what I found was that these running backs with top offensive lines are always hyper efficient guys. So Pro Football Network always comes out with a list of their top offensive lines before the season and after the conclusion of the particular season. So after the conclusion of 2022, the top 4 offensive lines according to Pro Football Network were Philadelphia, Baltimore, Green Bay, and Kansas City. So what we can take notice of here is that all 4 of those running backs, all of them had at least 4.9 yards per carry in 2022. And not only that, all of them had spike weeks in fantasy football at one week or another. Because here's the reality with offensive lines that are fantastic. Great offensive lines breed efficient running backs in the NFL. Rashad Penny is going to have a very efficient year this year, running behind that Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. Obviously, what's the main concern here, right? The main concern is DeAndre Swift. How can Rashad Penny get the top 10 upside with DeAndre Swift being there, likely going to be the running back 1? I hear that concern, right? DeAndre Swift looks like he's lining up to be the running back 1 in this offense, according to not only us as a fantasy community, just kind of putting things together, but also according to reports during the offseason. And the other thing about Swift is obviously he's got great pass catching upside. That's where his bread and butter is in fantasy football. But this leads me to the third reason why. So let's look back at 2 of those teams who had top 4 offensive lines in 2022. The teams I want to look at right now are Philadelphia and Baltimore. What do they both have in common? Obviously, what they have in common is that they both have really tremendous running quarterbacks. Running quarterbacks, what is their first instinct? Well, if you have legs like a Lamar Jackson or a Jalen Hurts, your first instinct is to not check the ball down to your running back whenever you face crisis and you face pressure coming right in your face from a defensive lineman or an edge rusher. That's the first instinct of someone like Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, Jared Goff, Big Ben in his final couple years. That's the first instinct of guys who don't have the mobility that Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson do. And you can add Justin Fields into the list. You get my point. The point is that their first instinct is to take off and to run. So what this will do with a guy who is a very good running back pass catcher is it's going to lower his ceiling because he's just not going to get the dump offs that he did with Jared Goff. And the problem here is that DeAndre Swift, if he doesn't have the pass catching work, he has not shown to be a carry heavy guy in his career. The most carries that he's had in one season in the NFL is 151 carries that he had in 2021. That is simply just not good enough to carry you to running back one status in fantasy football. His upside, like I said, comes from the pass catching. That is a bad combination with Jalen Hurts as your quarterback. The reason that I feel so strongly about this one, guys, is because Rashad Penny is just a better running back than DeAndre Swift is when it comes to carrying the ball. Now, here's the thing. Philadelphia may very well go into the season planning for DeAndre Swift to be their running back one, but some people would argue he's just as fragile as Rashad Penny is. If Rashad Penny stays healthy, he has top 10 upside. Moving on to the next running back on the list, it is Jerick McKinnon of the Kansas City Chiefs. So he is the running back 43 at Underdog, putting him in the rounds 10 to 11 range in fantasy football drafts. Now, this one is very similar to Rashad Penny, right? All these guys have something in common. There are lots of things here working against Jerick McKinnon. First of all, he's 31 years old. In fact, it's kind of interesting to think about. It's actually remarkable that he's made it this far in his career. Being a 31-year-old running back is usually the time where most running backs are retiring by now. So the fact that he's 31 and still playing is actually pretty cool. But the other problem here is that Isaiah Pacheco looks like he's lining up to be the running back one for Kansas City this year. But maybe one of the most impeding reasons why people just don't think that highly of McKinnon right now is because when you look back to 2022 and what he didn't start killing it until the back half of their season last year. And even when he did that, he finished as the running back 21 in fantasy football. So why does he have top 10 upside? There are three reasons why. Now, reason number one is obvious, right? He's got great pass catching upside. I am not saying anything new by saying that right here. And as you can see on the screen, it backs up what I'm saying. 4.2 targets per game, 30.1 yards per game, and 1.89 touchdowns per game. Like I said, I am not saying anything new here. But here's one thing I want to ask you guys real quick. Have you ever heard someone say, the best idea may be right under your nose? I personally think this applies to Kansas City, and here's why. So when Kansas City drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round in 2022, they were hyped just alongside with all of us as a fantasy community. And what we, and probably they didn't really think about at the time that they drafted him, was that they essentially locked themselves into trying to make Clyde Edwards-Helaire work for them as the running back one. Now, drafting a running back in the first round of drafts at this stage of the NFL, it's got good and bad to it, right? If you hit on a guy like Saquon Barkley, it's all upside, right? But if you don't hit and you get a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we only see the bad side of it. And that's Kansas City's problem, is that they have only seen the bad aside from like his first couple games in the NFL. Ever since then, it's been bad. So going into 2022, Kansas City was still trying to make Clyde Edwards-Helaire work as the running back one. It wasn't until after the bye week for Kansas City that they stopped using Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They decided to jump ship off of Clyde Edwards-Helaire at that point. Is it any coincidence that this was the same time period that Jerick McKinnon started to catch fire for Kansas City and in fantasy football? That's when Isaiah Pacheco became the primary carry back and Jerick McKinnon became the primary passing down running back. Now, obviously, mentioning Isaiah Pacheco, he is the running back one. He is going into the season as the running back one. There's no doubt about this one as far as who is going to handle the majority of this team's carries. And that will probably deter people from thinking that McKinnon has top 10 upside. But think about it like this. Now that Kansas City is done trying to make Clyde Edwards-Helaire work, apply Jerick McKinnon's back half of the season that you can see on the screen right now. Apply that to a full season of work. And combine that with a top 10 offensive line heading into 2023 and one of the greatest offensive schemers that we have ever seen in the NFL history, Jerick McKinnon has top 10 upside. Moving on to the last running back on this list, it is Zach Evans of the Los Angeles Rams. He is the running back 72 on Underdog right now, and he is currently going in the last round of your drafts and sometimes doesn't even get drafted. Now, for those of you who don't know Zach Evans, let me introduce him. So he was the Los Angeles Rams 6th-round pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. He's a running back out of Ole Miss. Now, he originally started his college career at TCU, where he was a very efficient back for them, and he didn't end up getting the majority of the carries until he transferred to Ole Miss, which is probably the reason why he transferred. I cannot stress this enough. This one has to go perfectly for anything to happen. He has to beat the odds on so many levels. The first thing he has to do is he has to beat out Cam Akers. Now, that seems like a tall task in and of itself, right? Cam Akers is heading into the season, coming off a fantastic end of the season. But here's one thing that I stress on this channel so much. I stress the importance of remembering history. So last year, like I said, the thing that you may remember most about Cam Akers was how excellent he was at the end of fantasy football in 2022. He was excellent in the playoff time, and he may have won you a league. He was absolutely outstanding. There's no doubt about that. But what I remember is that Cam Akers was inactive for most of the season in 2022, and he was almost traded off the team because he left the team building entirely. Not only did he want out, but Sean McVay publicly spoke out at the time about trading Cam Akers out of the building. Now, here's the thing. At this point, Sean McVay is talking about how excited he is for Cam Akers coming into 2023. But like Mike Tyson once said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. McVay and Akers, they're in a place right now where they're rebuilding their relationship. And that sounds all great, right? That sounds fantastic. But once the season starts, and if there's chaos in that building and they start to lose a bunch of games, you know, typical NFL stuff that can happen when the season starts, this could go south really, really fast, and they could find themselves in a very similar position to where they were in 2022 with Cam Akers. Now, Zach Evans is a very efficient running back, as you can see on the screen right now. Those are his efficiency numbers when it comes to his college career, when he was with Ole Miss and with TCU. I broke down him a lot in my draft guide. But this leads me to the next thing that he needs to overcome. So let's say real quick that he overcomes beating out Cam Akers, or Cam Akers just gets injured, and Zach Evans finds himself in the starting running back slot for the Los Angeles Rams. The first thing that Zach Evans has to do from there is prove that he can handle the workload. Most carries that he had in one season in college was 144 carries in 2022 when he was with Ole Miss. Now, like I said, there was factors that go into that, right? When he was with TCU, he was also fighting for carries with another rookie running back, Kendre Miller. So there was a lot of reasons why Zach Evans may have not been a 3-down back in college, but that is definitely something that we need to consider. We haven't seen him handle a big enough workload to really consider him to be a top fantasy option right now. What he also needs to do is he needs to prove that he can be a pass-catching asset for the Los Angeles Rams. Because like I said earlier, when you have a quarterback like Matt Stafford who is totally immobile, you need to have a running back who can catch the ball and bail out his quarterback. And he wasn't much of that in college, as you can see on the screen. Something I highlighted in my draft guide this offseason was my theory that maybe this could be a Kenneth Walker type of situation. Because what you can see on the screen right now, Kenneth Walker's passing numbers were very, very similar to Zach Evans in college. And he wasn't much of a receiving back either. Kenneth Walker ended up providing that upside for you in his rookie season. Now, the beauty of this situation is, even if it happens, right? Even if Zach Evans is the running back one for the Rams, all the weight is not on his shoulders. He's not going to be the focal point of this offense, even if he is the running back one. That will be Cooper Kupp. So that is going to leave a lot of opportunities for Zach Evans to maintain his efficient north and south running style that he has so well. Like I said earlier, everything has to line up perfectly for this one to hit in specific. But the beauty is, he can be your last pick in your draft. This comes down to me believing in a player, and I believe in Zach Evans. And if you want to know another guy I strongly believe in 2023, click on this video right here.